So the other thing we did in class today was talk about vaping as part of our marijuana education initiative here at Woodland Park Middle School. We have an anti-drug program, and in the seventh grade, we cover this topic. Now, it's something that has affected youth a lot in the United States to the point that it's become national news, especially at the end of last year. And so this is a very important topic, and I hope you guys pay attention to it. So we started by having a little brief discussion about what you guys already knew about vaping, and we asked questions like, why is vaping becoming so popular? What are some of the reasons people vape? And do you think there are any risks associated to it? And can it be addictive? And then some of the answers the students gave were that it's popular because it's a cool thing to do because it's easy. It's not that hard to get it. Sometimes people peer pressure you into it, and then you end up getting addicted. And then also, it can be laced with THC, which makes you feel good. And so there's a lot of reasons why people may start doing it. And on top of all of that, we talked about the fact that it is addictive because of the nicotine that is in it. And we also talked about some of the health risks. You guys mentioned things like your lungs are not made to inhale smoke, so there's damage that is made to the lungs. And we also talked about the fact that even though it's not as toxic as cigarette smoke, it still has nicotine, which is bad and addictive and can affect the development of the brain, young brains. Even worse if it's laced with THC. So vapes are basically e-cigarettes. You can hear it said as e-cigs, vapes, vape pens, vaporizers, or hookah pipes, or even pens. And I've even seen it like be something that is on like a hoodie with a little wire. So it's very, very well hidden. There's a lot of versions of it. Some of them look like pens. They look like USB drives. There's a lot of creative designs and setups for it. But in general, it's something that you do when you inhale from these devices that is referred to as vaping. And the devices have three major components. It has a heating element called the atomizer, which actually heats up a liquid that's inside of a cartridge. And it has a chemical compound inside, usually an oil-based compound that has THC or nicotine inside. And it could also have a flavor. So this is commonly called e-juice or e-liquid. And the flavor, in fact, is now illegal if it's in flavors that FDA has said appeal to young kids. We'll talk about that in a second. And lastly, it has a rechargeable battery to power the atomizer. And it's really that simple. And so here's an example of a vape pen. And this gas gets aerosolized by the pen as it heats up. The liquid vaporizes, and that's what the smoke that you end up inhaling. So it's a different kind of smoke from the cigarette smoke because it doesn't have as much of the toxins in it, but it's still bad for you. And we'll talk more about that next week. So the first vape cigarette was actually invented in 2006, and since then it's gotten a lot of popularity, especially because it's been marketed as something that to help people who are addicted to nicotine stop smoking cigarette smokes, which are much, much worse for you. So, however, it's also has had a great appeal for the youth, and it's caused a lot of problems. Now, most vaping devices are referred to as a device that can electronically deliver nicotine, right? Now, is it FDA approved? No. In fact, until 2016, FDA said nothing about it. And even since then, all it's actually really did is require people to list the ingredients that are inside of it. More recently, the FDA has actually talked about some other findings, however. For example, it's found that some flavors that have fruit flavors or mint flavors that are especially targeted or appeal to the children have now been banned because of some studies that actually have started to show that there could be serious lung injuries associated with the use of vaping products. And since this has actually have an increase in youth access and in youth use since the vape has begun, the FDA has now abolished these kind of like flavors. The next thing that I would like to talk about is that in 2006, the tobacco companies noticed that they were going to lose the market share because of the shift from cigarettes to vaping, and so they jumped right into it. They're not silly, and started getting involved in investing billions of dollars to develop products to get into this market. So some of the companies like Cool, Lucky Strike invented something called Vape, And some American companies invented ones called Blue and Views, but these are not as famous as some of the other ones like Vivid and Solaris, which were by Marlboro and other companies here in America. And finally, though, into 2016, by 2016, JUUL was the leading product. So even more than the tobacco companies' versions of it, JUUL has the biggest share of the market right now. And that's probably the one that you know about the most, even more than Views. So you can see how tobacco companies at first had the biggest part of the market, but since 2016, when JUUL came in with that really tiny portable vape pen looking that looks like a USB, and some other versions that are really cool and have lots of fun flavors, it's taking up a huge share of the market. And there's indications that a big part of that is actually youth consumption, which takes us to what we're going to talk about next week. We'll talk about more about stats about youth use and how it affects your health, and that's where we're going to continue our section. And we'll have another discussion after that about what are the effects that vaping can have for you, and what are some of the things you can do to say no and to make better choices. So I'll see you next week for that.